Turn to somebody right now and say, today's the first day of the rest of my life. Today's the first day of the rest of my life. That's exactly how the guy driving beside me from Nashville today looked. Today's the first day, here I go. Did you not catch the energy in that last song? There is no rock, there is no... I don't know who this guy is back. I can't go off camera. I don't know who that guy is. Boom! Did you guys see him do that? I was like, ooh, that was awesome, man. I was fired up. How many are excited to be here today? That's a little bit better. See, I'm excited because I really believe this morning that today can be the first day of the rest of your life. I really believe that when you come to moments like these, when we're talking about the choices that affect our future, that literally we can grab a hold of this morning some truths that can take us from wherever we may be in our lives to a new destination. That means if you're living this morning with regret, you can walk out of here today with regret in the rear view mirror of your life. And you can live life like we talked about last week through the windshield of God's plan. You see, He has a hope and a future. I like what it said in the message, and I said it last week. He says, I know what I'm doing. See, that brings hope to me because there's a lot of times I don't. I don't know about you, but sometimes I don't know what I'm doing, and it's encouraging for me to know that there is a God that we are connected to this morning who can look at each one of us and say, today is the first day of the rest of your life because today is the opportunity for you to choose a new direction, to put your faith in something besides yourself. Put your faith in something besides your boss. Put your faith in something beside a doctor's report. Put your faith in beside somebody than a guidance counselor. How many are thankful this morning that somebody who is supreme and sovereign over our lives is higher authority than the U.S. Congress? Oh no, I watch confusion every week on those channels. Man, I am glad that there's a sovereign God who's bigger than CNN. He's bigger than Fox. No matter what the news report is, there's someone bigger than that. So I want you to grab your outline this morning, and this morning you're going to have something a little unique. It's not going to be like a three-step plan. If I do these three things, then all life is going to be great. No, actually, the three things we're going to talk about today are some things we have to refuse to do in order to have the choices we need to have the future God has intended for our lives. And really, if we'll grab these three things and we will refuse to do them, your life will be transformed. Not because I said so, but because God's word teaches that to us. That it gives us a new path full of hope and a future because we don't have to listen to those things around us. I was sitting in my living room about 3 weeks ago, and I got a phone call from my sister who lives in Sarasota, Florida. She watches every Sunday morning these services. She's out there shouting out to you, probably by the beach, which is disgusting to me, but she's probably there anyway. And she said, Scott, I want you to get on your computer. Are you at home? And I said, yeah. And she goes, I'm at home. She goes, well, I'm in Kansas City today, and I'm at a conference called Skills USA. And you're going to be just amazed by what's going on. There's about 15 to 17,000 high school and college kids filling this arena in Kansas City. And Caterpillar and Snap-on Tools are their two corporate sponsors. And they are up talking to these high school students about the future, the choices they're going to be making for their career paths. And she knows that I spend a lot of time speaking in schools. And so I immediately grabbed my laptop. They're sitting in front of the TV and put it on and begin to watch these people come to the platform one after another, students giving shouts out to different states, and you'd hear the roar from Kentucky and Louisiana and Tennessee, and it was amazing to hear these kids coming together. And then they introduced their keynote speaker. I got really excited when I saw who the keynote speaker was, because it was a guy that I have grown up on TV watching, and it's not necessarily a show that you would watch as a sitcom every week, but it's a show that as a guy, and maybe as a girl, you just kind of love where this guy goes, and it's the show Dirty Jobs with Mike Rowe. Oh, I'm hearing it now, yeah. I mean, you're wondering what kind of pile he's going to be cleaning out this week, don't you, when you see him go there? And so I'm thinking, man, this is going to be great. What is Mike Rowe going to say to these kids? And so I'm sitting there in my living room and I'm watching, and they introduce him and the place erupts. 17,000 kids screaming for Mike Rowe, and he comes out in a pair of blue jeans and a t-shirt, just like you would expect. And he kind of just cocks his hip out and he says, you know, I was supposed to speak here 15 years ago and I couldn't do it because I was in Las Vegas working with a pig farmer. That's right. He had learned to take all the scraps from all the casinos, and he had taken those and fed those scraps to his pigs, and now his pigs were getting larger than anybody else's pigs. And they kind of looked around. Everybody's like, oh yeah, I remember that episode. That was disgusting, man. You were in there with the slop and stuff. It was great. And he goes, and 14 years ago, you asked me to come and speak, but I was up north and I was working at a windmill farm, and I was inside cleaning out all the decay so those windmills could turn air and move power, and I couldn't be here with you. And he went down the line 13 years ago, 12 years ago, and it was every episode that we'd ever watched. And I was like, I remember that one, I remember that one. And then he finally got to today, and he said, but today they quit filming Dirty Jobs, and I'm here. And the place erupted. And then he went on to tell this story. He said, you know, in 1970s, I was going to my high school guidance counselor, and I was asking my counselor, what do I do after this? Because this is what they've given me as a platform. These are things I have to do. I have to show up and go to first grade. I have to show up and go through high school. So what do I do now? And the guidance counselor looked at him and he said, Mike, do you want to be successful in life? And Mike said, well, sure, I want to be successful. And he said, well, Mike, I've got some things for you. He said, you need to go to college, Mike. You need to get a 4-year degree. And Mike said, well, there's just a couple problems with that. Number one, I don't have any money. And number two, I'm not real sure what I'm supposed to do to go to college. And then that guidance counselor did something that penetrated Mike's heart. He turned a poster around in his room that was initiated by our government to increase college attendance in the United States of America. And you may have seen it. It was a poster with a guy with a sledgehammer in one arm and a guy with a doctor's suit. And it said, work harder, not smarter. And he went, what has that got to do with my life? What am I going to do with my life in that? And he said, I can't do that. I need to do some hard work. I need to get out there and do something. And the guy came back to him and told him again, no, you've got to learn to live your life in an education. And once you get the education, then those things will come to you. And Mike said he walked out of that door feeling really depressed about his future and what he would do. It wasn't too long ago, Mike said, after he left that time in life when they quit filming Dirty Jobs, that he found himself walking down an airport. And as he was walking through that airport, he heard a businessman shouting at him, hey, Mike, you're Mike Rowe. And the businessman was well-dressed, and he walked up to Mike. He said, can I have your autograph? He said, well, sure. And he said, man, we love your show, Mike. We watch it all the time. I get the kids together in the living room because I want them to know just all the possibilities that are out for them in life, what they can do if they put their minds to it. Mike kind of shrugged his shoulders and said, that's awesome. And so he signed it and he handed it to him and he went on his way down to his gate. And he sat there at the gate, and as he was looking around, all of a sudden he heard again, hey, Mike Rowe, you're Mike Rowe. And sure enough, he looked around, another business guy had recognized him. He thought, man, this is amazing. In one terminal, all these people know who I am. And the business guy made his way over to Mike and he said, man, we watch your show all the time at home. As a matter of fact, I get all my kids around because I want them to see what can happen to them if they don't get a college degree. And Mike said to himself as he got down that terminal and got to get on that airplane, he said, all I could think about was, what a jerk. Isn't that the truth, though, in our lives, how we feel so pressured? Pressured to get a high school diploma, and then we get that diploma and we think everything's going to change, don't we? We work so hard because we want to keep our GPA up, because then we get into the National Honor Society, and then we can go to a candle lighting ceremony, and then we can get that nice little emblem that goes on our jacket, and then we can walk through our high school days, and finally when graduation comes, we have more tassels around our neck than the next person. Have you went to a high school graduation and you watch yourself going, what's the blue one and the red one and the green one and the black one for? I just had a yellow one. And you start feeling kind of normal. And you feel a little let down because your life didn't measure up. And then you think to yourself, well, I know what it is. I got a high school diploma, but I haven't went to college yet. If I can get the college degree, if I can go through that process and really get a career path, then people will start to notice me and my life will have more meaning than it does right now. And so you work really hard at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years of going to college. And you finally graduate and all the family gathers around. They take the picture in front of the fireplace and you come in front of your friends and you grab the diploma and you look around and nothing's changed other than $60,000 worth of debt that you've got to pay back. And then you think to yourself, I know what it is. I've went through high school. I've went through college. If I could just find the right person to marry. And then you look around your culture and you go, oh, they got to be out here somewhere. And it's like eeny, meeny, miny, mo as we go through our culture trying to find that right person that we can marry. Because if we can find the right person, then life will have meaning. Then life will have purpose. And that big day comes. We meet that person. We put a ring on their finger. We come to that point of marriage. They walk down the aisle. We say our I do's. And then we find ourselves 25, 35, 40, 50 years later wondering where the purpose is in our lives. You see, we have a tendency to allow this culture to mold and massage us into what they think we need to be. I want you to write this statement down. Your choices will affect your calling. Your choices affect your calling. You see, that's the very thing you're wired to be. That's the intimate plan that God has made for you. That is the way you're wired, the gifts, the special personality that you have. Everything that was formed together, as we read last week in Psalms 139. All your works are wonderful. I know that full well. I was putting together in my mother's womb. That when God begins to form you and he makes your eyes, when God begins to give you color in your hair, if you still have some, he gives you that color in your hair and he gives you that color in your eyes and he gives you that personality that's so unique, that you are uniquely positioned for your calling, that God has wired you and positioned you for something very special in life. And you have to understand this morning that you don't necessarily have to go out there looking for your calling. No, when you begin to make the right choices in life, watch, your calling will find you. When you begin to make the right decisions, when you begin to find the right pathways, God will begin to reveal to you exactly what his purpose and his divine plan for your life is. So I want us to look at three things this morning that we have to do. I told the earlier crowd, we could probably spend the entire session just on this first one because this is really the crutch. I mean, this is the foundation. If we can't get to this, it's going to be very difficult for us to get to the next two. And that is this, write this down. We have to refuse to be defined by others. I think of the story of Moses, and you know the story of Moses. Pharaoh was nervous, and Egypt was watching as the children of Israel began to populate the earth. And he began to think to himself, if they get too many, they'll probably overthrow us. And so he devises a plan, and he says, you know what we got to do? We're going to kill every born young man so they cannot populate the earth, and we can control them and make sure we have them in their destiny. And so Pharaoh's daughter, she's on the other side of the water, and Moses' parents, believing that God has a plan for him, doesn't want him to die, and so they put him in a little basket and send him down the Nile River, and Pharaoh's daughter sees him there and rescues that baby and literally raises that Hebrew child in Pharaoh's court. The Bible says, and as you read in Exodus chapter 1 and chapter 2 and chapter 3, Moses begins to look around and he begins to see his own people, where he knows he comes from, the people that are his people, that he knows are his true identity. He begins to see them struggle with who they are. He sees them in their captivity, and he comes to a crossroad in his life where he has to make a decision. Number one, he can remain in Pharaoh's court, and he can have luxury. He can have everything in his heart's desire. He can have maidservants come to him and beseech him and meet his needs. They will be there, the paparazzi, to take his picture. Everything will be wonderful in his life if he makes that decision. But something inside of Moses tells him, you need to find your true identity. You need to follow the true path. You need to find what I've given you, what I've created in you to be. And look what it says in Hebrews chapter 11. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasure of Egypt, because he was, watch, looking ahead to his reward. You see, this morning, God did not create in you a purpose and a plan for your life to see you take your choices and give them to somebody else. He did not create in us this passion inside of us, this desire, these visions that we have for our lives, and then have someone in your life derail you from that vision, take away that passion, and give you a new course in life. You see, it can't be your parents, it can't be a person in your life, a person in a church, it can't be a person in a school that takes away what God has given you. Only you can give those things away. And this morning, if you're going to see your choices affect your calling, if you're going to make the right choices and acquire your calling, watch this, you've got to have an identity check. You've got to refuse to be defined by other people. In our culture, we call it peer pressure. And we have a tendency, and don't we, in adult cultures, to always look at high school campuses and middle school campuses and say, man, those kids have it hard, man. They have to deal with that pressure all the time, trying to fit in. But the truth were to be told this morning, there are many of us in this room who have reached adulthood and we find ourselves in the same rat race that a culture plays with us, where we are continually being defined by a boss. We're continually being defined by a paycheck, where we live a lie in our life. We don't really become who we need to be. What we do is we try to obtain all the things the culture says we need, and so we spend money we don't have, and we find ourselves getting in debt. Why? Because we're trying to impress other people, and we're like the hamster in the wheel. We keep rolling and rolling because we just know that everybody's looking at us, and then we hear voices in the back of our head from fathers and mothers and people in our past who told us what our life would be, and we spend our entire eternity living with somebody's definition of what we're supposed to be. Oh, could I tell you this morning, there is freedom in your future when you refuse to be defined by somebody else. If you would get up this morning and walk out of this room, it wouldn't be just a statement you turn to somebody and say, today is the best day and the rest day of my life. No, you would be able to get up with a true identity. You see, we really have an identity problem. We've forgotten who we are. That we are king's kids, prepared for royalty. The Bible says in 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 9 through 12, that you are a chosen people, a royal generation, a holy priesthood, a people belonging to God. Once you were not a people, now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, now you have received mercy. That we can get up from where we are and we can begin to go into the culture and live a life that God has intended for us. I wonder this morning how many of us are facing the pressures of other people. That when we go to that store, when we drive that car, when we live in that house, when we make those decisions, when we take that job, that we find ourselves just trying to impress the boss because we can just get one more paycheck. If I can just do a little bit better, then somebody else is going to be proud of me and then I'll get one more compliment. If I can just live a life and get in the gym and work harder and harder, then somebody will notice me and think that I'm really doing a good job with my body. And we find ourselves feeling neglected, rejected, feeling hopeless in despair because we have lost sight of who we really are. We have given up the very things that God has given us. A couple weeks ago, I was sitting and getting ready to go to Elizabethtown, Tennessee, and thought we were going to have an event we were planning for that city. And as we were making our way, we were just about to Crossville, Tennessee, and I got a phone call from the directors there, and they said, don't come. Our entire field's underwater. We're going to have to cancel the event. We turned the truck around there on the interstate and headed back to Nashville, and the kids were in the back seat, and I said, hey, you guys want to go canoeing? They go, yeah, we'd love to go canoeing. My son just turned 18 this week. My daughter's 14, and they had never really got into a canoe and went down a river. And so I thought, this will be awesome, a great opportunity. We're going to be in town. And so I said, call some of your friends. Let's plan tomorrow. We're all going to go canoeing. We're going to get up early, and we're going to go down the Harpeth River. Now, my daughter is 14, and she's a princess. The dirtiest thing she's probably seen is the dirt that sits on Cinderella's castle in her little bedroom. I said, honey, we're going to get in a boat. And she goes, oh, that sounds wonderful, Daddy. And if Peyton was watching right now, she talks like a princess. Her hands are out in front. And I said, oh, it's going to be a wonderful time, honey. We're going to go down the water. We're going to see all the beautiful things that God has created, and all your friends are going to be with us. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then we showed up at the canoe hut. Have you smelled those before? Yeah, there needs to be some alcohol rub somewhere in the canoe hut. And so we go in there and we get our paddles, and they tell us what we need to put around our life jackets, and we're going to get ready to get our canoe, and then we get in the van. Have you been in those vans? And my daughter now is starting to figure this out. This is not a carriage and white horses. And so we go down to the place where you're going to put the canoe in the water, and then we go down there, and the guy kind of sits her in the canoe, and you can see she's a little bit nervous about this. And so we get going down the Harpeth River, and sure enough, there are snakes that come out in the water, and I hear, screams come from their boats, and I'm in the back going, oh, it's okay, honey, just keep going down the river. You know the statement we parents lie to our kids, they're more scared of you than that, don't worry about it. And we finally get out of that, and we go to a restaurant to eat lunch. We're sitting there at a restaurant eating lunch, and I have a blue bandana on like the biker from the Harley rally. I'm dressed in my cutoff shirt, my old shorts, because what have I just been doing? Canoeing. It's a Sunday afternoon, we're enjoying our meal, and out of the corner of my eye, I look, and I see a man in a well-dressed suit with a tie firmly placed to his neck. And fear all of a sudden grabs a hold of me, because it is a man from my past in a place he should not be. And this is a man that when I grew up to preach in churches and to speak to young people, he would often come to me and say, you know, Scott, if you're going to talk to people, you got to look a certain way. Now, you need to have a suit looking like this, and this is how you need to present yourself. And I just didn't fit that mold. Can you tell? And out of the corner of my eye on a Sunday afternoon after going canoeing with a blue bandana, are you starting to get the picture, with the cut-off sleeves, I look over and he is sitting 2 feet from me. I'm going, oh, dear Lord Jesus. This guy's going to let me have it. And here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking he's going to look at me. Now, he hasn't seen me in years. So I look over at my daughter, and my daughter's just freaking out. She's like, what, Daddy, what is wrong? What's wrong with you? I go, no, just don't say Daddy's name. Don't say Daddy's name. Whatever you do, don't say Daddy's name. So we eat the whole meal, and I'm going to Peyton. Is he still there? Is he still there? Is he still there? No, he's gone. I go, whew. You know what I did? I allowed someone to define for me who I am, rather than embracing who God called me to be. Oh, if you could find the freedom from all the people in your culture that you encounter, the people at your work, if you could get rid of all the pressure of those people who are pushing you into a mold to be a certain way, to act a certain way, to walk a certain way, to dress a certain way, if you could just walk through all of that and say, I refuse to be defined by other people. I want to be like Moses. I want to step up to the plate and say, this is what I was created to be. Like it or lump it, here I am. And see the fulfillment of what God has for you in your life. You know, I love it when Ralphie says, I double dog dare you. Folks, I triple dog dare you. Walk out of here this morning with the freedom of not having to look in the past, not having to look around you to be what God wants you to be. Secondly, if we're going to have those choices and make the right choices to affect our future, not only do we have to be refused to be defined by others, we have to refuse to be defeated by fear and circumstances. All of us in this room have probably heard the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in a fiery furnace. I can hardly say those names, so I call them Shad, Mad, and Bad. I mean, you know the story. King Nebuchadnezzar, he has overcome the Jewish people, and he says to them, I'm going to train you. I'm going to take the biggest, the strongest, the most fit people, and for the next 3 years, I'm going to train you to be in my forces. And so everybody just kind of falls into line, and they're living their lives. And the Bible says in chapter 2, it's about 2 years into it, that he starts, King Nebuchadnezzar, who's paranoid a lot about people following him, starts looking around thinking, you know what? I need to do something to make sure that everybody gets it physically, socially, and spiritually. That I'm the one who's calling the shots. And so he puts this giant idol on the plain of Dura, 90 feet high, 9 feet wide, and he says, when we play the music, I want you to bow. I want you to show me that you understand my authority. And so they get everything together, and they put that big idol out there on the plain of Dura and 90 feet high, and the music begins to play, and the Bible says that all the people fell and worshiped. Except for 3. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Shad, mad, and bad. They're just standing there in the midst of this pressure, watching everybody around them. Keep in mind, they had been trained for 3 years to know how they're supposed to obey in the king's palace. I mean, if King Nebi says this is what's going to happen, they knew what to take place. They had eaten from his table. They had worked out in his gym. They knew the authority of what he had. And this is just another thing to fall in line. And they said, listen, guys, here's what's going to happen. If you don't do this, we're going to fire up that furnace and we're going to throw you in there. Here comes the real temptation to give away your choice. In the midst of your fear, in the midst of your confusion, when you have the consequences of your choice facing you. Oh, if I make this decision, will I have another paycheck? Oh, if I make this decision, what will my family think? Oh, if I make this decision, what will all my friends think? Oh, can't you feel the pressure? They're in this moment. And then he threatens them one more time because they're not going to bow. And he takes those 3 children and he throws them in the fiery furnace. And then he does some new math. 1, 2, 3, 4. And he gathers the guys around. He says, wait a minute. Didn't we throw 3 in that fire? Yes, that's right, we did. Well, I see 4, and 1 is like the Son of God. I like what the scripture says. Look at it. Daniel chapter 3, when they're being faced with the fire, if we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hands. Are you ready? Here it is. Here comes freedom. But even if he does not, are you ready to capture the freedom from your fear and circumstances? Are you ready to refuse the fear that's going to come upon your life when you are faced with the decision of your future and all fear falls upon you from those around you, those behind you, those in front of you, and including the news channel? When you want to face that future, you've got to develop this I don't give a rip attitude. You've got to say, I've got a God who is bigger than any of this. And listen to me, I'm not going to listen to fear. I'm not going to listen to confusion. I'm going to set my feet firmly here and I'm going to walk straight toward him. And even if he does not. Now, we in the church, what do we want to do? Erupt for shad, mad, and bad. Way to take a stand, guys. That's because we know the end of the book. What are you going to do when your book's being written? When your chapter's not finished? You do just like the Hebrew writer says, by faith, I'll stand here. By faith, Noah when the waters were rising. By faith, Moses when no one could understand his mumbling. By faith, when God calls you to where he's calling you, you've got to develop. But even if God does not, I'm still facing my future, making the right choice, refusing to be defined by the fear that's around me. Third and finally, if you're going to grab a hold of your future and make the choices that affect your calling, you've got to refuse to be detained by your stinkin thinkin. I talked about this briefly last week when we talked about that we can hear from God and that nothing just... You were here? Have you seen that this week? Have you encountered a living God in your presence this week as you've walked from this point of where you are, when you put the right inputs in your life and you said, God, I want to hear from you. God, I want to look for you through the circumstances of my life. God, when you speak, I want to know that you're showing up. God, I want to hear it. Don't let me miss it. Don't let me be away for a commercial, God. I want to be there. I want to see it when you cross my path. When you refuse to have this stinking thinking in our brains, you have to understand. That's why in Ephesians it says to take on the helmet of salvation. Why? Because that is where the enemy will attack you the most. Why is it the helmet of salvation? Because in the salvation, that is when you are complete. When Christ died on the cross and provided salvation, it is completeness for you and I. It gives you and I a pathway to heaven. It gives us freedom from our past. It gives us a new future and a new hope. That's why Jeremiah was so excited to give it to us. Ephesians says, put on the helmet of salvation, the fullness of what God has done for you. Why? Because the enemy is out there to throw thoughts into your mind, to destroy your thinking. But watch this, because if he can destroy your thinking, he can destroy your activities. You know the largest organ in your body is right here. It's your brain. And we give over our mind to all the things around us. We listen to what Oprah says, and this new talk show says, and this new commercial says, and what the latest says on the sitcom. And we have to find those things in our mind and say, how do I deal with all this when I'm trying to find God's purpose? And confusion sets in, and we become disgusted and frustrated, and we feel like giving up. You have to refuse to be detained by your stinking thinking. Look what it says in Romans. So here's what I want you to do. God helping you take your everyday, ordinary life. You're sleeping, you're eating, you're going to work, and you're walking around. Sounds like all of life, doesn't it? And place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, here it comes. Fix your attention on God. You'll be charged from the inside out. Readily recognize what he wants from you and quickly respond to it. What is the Roman writer saying? What is Paul saying? He's saying, you've got to get yourself in alignment with God. You've got to get rid of the identity crisis, and you've got to face everything in your brain and say, no, I'm not going to listen to that. I'm going to choose to put things in my mind that know who he is and give me an opportunity to follow him. Quickly in closing, I want you to see this. This past week, my son turned 18. I told him the story of Mike Rowe. I wanted him to see it because what happens as a senior when you're 18? What do you feel? Enormous pressure. Everybody's figured out what your future needs to be. And I looked at Zach and I said, Zach, what do you want to do? You notice I didn't say, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? He said, Dad, I just don't feel like college is for me. I want to start my own business. I said, fine, let's do it. Let's start your own business. And he kind of looked at me and said, you mean now? I said, absolutely, son, right now. I have a friend who runs a business meeting in Hendersonville area on Tuesday mornings, and he's been trying to get me to come to recognize our company. And I said, you know what, Zach? We're going to go to a business meeting networking session. He goes, really? I said, yeah. I said, you know what you want to do, right? Yeah. I want to open a car detail shop, and I want to work on engines, and I want to sell some cars on the side. That's just a passion of mine, Dad. I want to be a part of that. I said, then you're going to go, and you're going to tell 50 business people around that table what your business is. And I could see his knees start doing this. We walked into that, you know how those business network meetings are. Everybody's kind of showing each other up, you know. Look at my cards. Big ones, aren't they? Look at that. And they got their 2-cent commercial ready to go. You know, you walk in, hey, my name's John. Hey, I'm Bill. Good to meet you. And they're looking right past you to somebody else. We all know how it is. It's positioning. I said, Zach, don't worry about it, man. Get you some eggs, toast, sit down, man, drink a cup of coffee. He's just in his jeans and t-shirt. Jason, the guy that invited us, comes over and puts a big hug on him and says, man, I'm glad you're here. I know you're turning 18 this week. And I said, I'm going to stand up for him, Jason. I'm going to talk about what he's doing because I don't want to embarrass him. Refuse to be defined by others. A lady walks up to me. Remember what message I'm working on for this week for us? Guess what I fell in the trap of doing? Oh, it's so easily done in our lives. The lady who's in charge of that meeting came over to Zach before he had a chance to speak and put her arm around him. And she knew me. And she said, Zach, listen to me. When it comes your time, I want you to stand up and not your dad. And I want you to tell these people what you're wired to do. And I got to tell you, as a dad, I gulped. Fear came over me, and I began to be exactly what that first point was. Oh man, can he do it? I don't know if he can do this. Came around his turn, Zach stood up. He said, hi, my name's Zach Chevalier. I'm 18 years old. And I'm opening a car detail business. And here's what he said. Big or small, give me a call. I went, wow! That's my boy. And then I started thinking, what am I going to say? He gets up from that meeting. Business guys walk over to him and say, hey, my daughter's got a card. It's got a smoky smell in it. Can you get that out? And Zach goes, sure can. He goes, here's my card. One by one, people started coming to him. I said, Zach, you're building your business. You're 18. You haven't even graduated. This is awesome. And you could see something happening in him. All the fear of what the future's supposed to be because you're supposed to have this degree. You're supposed to go after this passion. You can see it all coming off of him. It was like someone being set free in bondage. He started putting his shoulders back going, yeah, I could do this. I could do this. And before he left that room, he already had cars lined up. The next day, we went down to meet a detail. I'm hurrying, I'm sorry. We went down to see a detail shop, and I said, you need to meet this guy. The guy at Lexus says, he's a good friend of mine, says, you need to meet this guy. He knows what he's doing. He's a great mentor for you. And so we went down to this paint shop and said, Aaron, I'm Scott. This is my son, Zach. He's going to open a car detail shop. Same day, folks. And Aaron looks at him and goes, hey, man, that's great. He goes, you know, I usually send stuff to Rod Shop, and it's about $400 for what I do. And he goes, I'm looking for somebody who can do the $200 and $250 cars. And Zach goes, well, that's me. And he goes, man, give me your card. I'll start sending them your way. And Zach gets in the car and he goes, man, that's great. This is great. I said, Zach, we're not done yet. I go, he goes, what are we going to do? I said, we're going to go down to Rod, the guy who has the detail shop where you're learning. We're going to go meet. I've never met him. We're going to go talk to him. And so we drive down. This guy has an enormous detail shop, and he's in his mid-50s doing great work. And we pull up in there, and Rod doesn't know who I am. And so I introduce myself. I said, well, I'm Zach's dad. He goes, man, I've been wanting to meet you. It's really good to meet you. And I said, has Zach ever told you what he wants to do? He goes, no. And he goes, what do you want to do, Zach? And I said, he wants to open his own detail shop. And he wants to learn from the best. And Rod put his arm around my son. And he said, listen, son, if that's what you're passionate about, I'll teach you and walk with you through the whole journey. He woke up that morning not knowing what his future was. In 24 hours, God showed up and said, I'll go before you. Mom and dad, college student, single mom, listen to me. If you would permit God to get those folks out of your way who are defining your future, if you would trust him in the fear and the circumstances of whatever you might face and say, my God is able to deliver me, watch, but even if he doesn't, I'm going to renew my mind and allow him to penetrate me so that my future is one that's tasty, ordered by him, because nothing just happens. I want you to bow your heads with me this morning. I wonder what job situation you're facing. I wonder what relationship issue you have. I wonder what doctor's report you got this week. Who are you being defined by? Oh, could I urge you this morning to refuse to be defined by others? To be like Moses and make the choice to say, I don't want to have an identity problem. I want to be who he's called me to be. Father, I pray this morning for those who are in this room that even this week are going to make choices that will affect their future. Oh God, would you intersect their life in such a way that you would give them the faith to rise up, even if it was a seed that was left here this morning, God, put a morsel in their pathway this week, that when they're tempted to say it, hogwash and walk away, that God, they'll step on that morsel and say, no, I'm not going to give this choice away. God, I pray that you would raise fear or faith up within them, that fear might leave them, that God, they might go out of here victoriously living for you, that they might have a new hope and a new future today. That God, you would give them what you're promising them right now as they trust you with their tomorrow. For it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.